Well folks, the hype cycle for Monster Hunter Wilds is officially in full swing. Shortly before the game will be playable at the upcoming Gamescom in Germany, Capcom is giving us a ton of new information in the form of videos showing off new gameplay features. Now, alongside a couple videos covering basic mechanics and the new focus mode, the main event of this info drop is undoubtedly the weapon preview videos, which at the time I am making this video are releasing one per day, and I believe the timing of these will be lining up so they are all out just in time for the game's showing at Gamescom. Each video will cover one of the game's weapon types, and as we have confirmation that all 14 of the classic Monster Hunter weapons will be returning, then that should give us 14 videos in total. As a quick aside, I actually went to the website to triple check this info, and I was greeted by this cool new image that shows off the official renders of each weapon type. But we can see that at this point, all the previews that we have not yet seen are shadowed out. But this is also pretty neat because it's also like a little sneak peek at some weapon models that we have not yet seen. Not really too much point in overanalyzing this since they will all be revealed in just over a week, but some of these silhouettes are pretty eye-catching, like this strikingly sleek switch axe design and this charge blade seemingly having a spiderweb motif on it. It is of course always fun when we get these types of previews to take a good look at the gear given to the hunters, as some of it may be made out of monsters we have yet to meet. That said, let's focus on doing that for the weapons we can actually see. So back to the actual videos then. Each of these videos will be about a minute long and will be showing off some gameplay actions for the given weapon. For this video, I will be watching these showcases and breaking down the new and existing weapon behaviors, and also just sharing some general thoughts and speculations on how I feel the weapon will play in Wilds. Although I guess it won't just be this video. Because there will be a whole lot to cover across the 14 weapon types, I will be making multiple videos instead of one extremely long one. But in a move that will probably be suboptimal for YouTube analytics, I will also not be making one video for each weapon because the idea of trying to get one video out a day sounds horrible to me. Instead, I will be releasing a total of 3 videos. The first one will be covering the first 4 weapons in the order that the previews were released, then the second one will be the next 5, and the final one will include the remaining 5. I'm hoping that this will give me a few decent length videos, and I can also work ahead a little bit as the new previews are coming out. So as I am beginning to write this script, the 5th weapon preview is on the horizon, so there is nothing left for me to do but start breaking these videos down. Our very first weapon preview is for the Greatsword. This was a pretty obvious choice as the Greatsword is essentially the flagship weapon of the Monster Hunter series, plus we have also already seen it in action a good amount in the past trailers. As I alluded to earlier, we will be taking some time to look at the Hunter's gear showcased in these previews, in part to appreciate the design work of it, but also to attempt to associate it with any monsters that we may or may not have yet met. That said, both this armor set and the weapon are ones that we've seen plenty of times before. Most likely, the armor is the standard issue Hunter's set, and the Greatsword would be the default weapon line as well. Of course, for starter gear, this stuff is looking pretty dang stylish. Now to jump into some moves, and right off the bat, the first thing we are shown is a true charge slash. This is of course one of the staples of the weapon, becoming its most powerful single hit attack after it was introduced back in World. Animation-wise, this move is basically unchanged. By the way, as you might be noticing right now, when applicable, I will be providing some footage of the weapon moves from past games, probably mostly World and Rise, so we can get some nice side-by-side comparisons with the moves from Wilds. Moving forward a bit, we got a few clips showing off some basic attacks. This first basic move is our bread and butter, the Charge Slash. Seems to be behaving just as we would expect it, although there is one neat little visual detail that I'm noticing here. If we look at the Hunter, we can see their body flashing to represent each level of charge, which is a similar effect to the charging of the World Greatsword. What's different, however, is the color of this flash. In World, all of the flashes are red, with the brightness increasing with each level. Here, however, we can see that the first flash is white, the second one is a yellow or orange, and the final one is red. This is a neat little way to help differentiate between the different charge levels, but also this particular color scheme is consistent with other weapons' charge behaviors, like the white, yellow, red charge levels being used for the longsword spirit gauge, and the charge blade also using the yellow and red to represent how much file charge we have to stock. Now, on the subject of the charge slash, there's also another new feature for the greatsword that wasn't actually shown off in this video. As I mentioned earlier, in addition to these weapon previews, we also received a pair of videos showing off basic mechanics and a general overview of the new focus mode. And let me cover this video about focus mode real quick, since we'll be talking about the focus mode behaviors for all future weapons we talk about as well. So the basic idea behind focus mode is that it is a stance that we can enter that places an aiming reticule on our screen. And simply put, when in this stance, our weapon attacks and blocks will be aimed in the general direction of this reticule. Now supposedly, this mode will also enable brand new attacks for each weapon, but the general idea is that it will allow us to aim our attacks and blocks wherever we want. So the first thing that is shown in this demo video is the greatsword aiming while charging a slash. And look at this, while charging the slash, we are able to turn a whopping 180 degrees before releasing it. While we could slightly rotate while charging in previous games, it wasn't even close to this amount. The most we could adjust a greatsword charge was the Rage Slash skill from Rise, and honestly, this made it so much easier to use than the True Charge Slash. I think the fact that potentially any move will be able to be aimed to this degree will be huge for helping us land attacks in Wilds. Anyways, next up we've got a demonstration of the greatsword being used for hit and run tactics, which is nothing new to the weapon. But right after that, we've got a usage of the tackle, which is maybe the opposite of hit and run tactics, instead allowing us to take attacks head on. Right after this tackle, we have a usage of the jumping wide slash, and if you don't play much greatsword, you might have thought that this was a fancy new move, but nah, it's been in Sense World. It looks pretty cool, but it isn't really used often, so I'm curious if it will be made more powerful in Wilds. Okay, and next up we have a guard, completely standard here. There might be an additional behavior to this relating to the new clash mechanic, but that's coming up in a bit. Now for something completely new, whatever the heck this move is. We got to see this move in the trailer, and it is still just as crazy looking. The first part of this move we can see seems to be a charged upswing, which is a type of attack that we have not had before with the greatsword. If we go back to the first trailer, by the way, it seems that we were able to do this same upswing without charging at all. In fact, it looks like we are holding the focus mode stance right before doing the move, so it could be that this move is accessed from focus mode. Now, what happens next still isn't completely clear. A lot of us are speculating that this is functioning as a sort of counter-attack, because now, in both clips of the move that we have seen, it is timed to intercept an incoming attack and the resulting clash sends the monster reeling. It could be that this is just a high damage move that happens to get a lucky stagger, but I think the fact that this move also has a follow-up running attack using the hook slinger to help us close the distance tells us that this move is expecting us to knock the monster back. My guess is that this upswing might work as a normal attack, but if we time it with certain monster attacks, we get the huge knockback and then the follow-up will be enabled. The next move we move on to is another brand new one that has shown up in previous trailers. It seems that the main purpose of this move is to be a precision strike on weak points. Which, by the way, it was made clear in the focus mode video that repeated attacks on monster parts will create wounds, and focus mode itself highlights both of these wounds as well as seemingly natural weak points on the monster. At any rate, this move is just really cool and super brutal looking. Rounding out the preview, we have another look at the awesome new clash mechanic where, after blocking an attack, we shove the greatsword into the monster's mouth and are able to hold it in place. We still aren't quite sure how this is triggered, but I believe it was stated by the devs that these clashes can trigger in different situations for different monsters. For this one at least, it appears it happened after blocking a swing from the Doshagama. It looks like this block was done at the last second, so maybe triggering the clash requires good timing. I definitely look forward to learning all about the different interactions between weapons and monsters for these clashes. Now for the final part of this video. This is most definitely another mechanic that we learned about from some behind closed doors presentations, a sneak attack. Basically, it was learned that if you are able to sneak up on a monster, you can do a single powerful strike to start combat. Judging by how the camera zooms in during this move, and given that we are attacking from behind, it makes sense that this would be a unique sneak attack. Depending on how strong these are, I wonder if they will be the optimal option for waking up monsters, as that seems like it could be pretty convenient. But that should do it for the Greatsword preview. Overall, there wasn't too much here that we haven't seen, but the new Wilds changes are still looking extremely cool and stylish. In my opinion, I think the fact that we will be able to aim attacks much more with focus mode will be the most monumental change for the weapon, as I cannot understate how much easier it is to land a greatsword attack when you have 360 degrees of adjustment. Alright, so the next weapon preview we received was for the Heavy Bowgun. This does immediately derail the classic Monster Hunter weapon order, but for the second preview, this choice does make sense because after the Greatsword, the Heavy Bowgun is the weapon that we have seen the second most of in trailers. So first things first, it is gear inspection time. This armor is quite clearly the high metal armor set from previous games, and the Bowgun is a match to the basic Iron Heavy Bowgun, which by the way is different from the Heavy Bowgun we see in the trailer. I think the one in the trailer is of the same line as the Greatsword, which would be the starter weapon line unique to the locale, similar to how Rise had the Kamura series weapons in addition to bone and iron. Let's skip this first bit for now and get to the basics. So the first thing we have here is some basic shots from the Bowgun, and I never really even thought about it when it was shown in the last trailers, but this Heavy Bowgun is definitely utilizing rapid fire. Like, this series of 3 shots is exactly how the light bowgun's rapid fire works. In previous games, heavy bowguns have never been capable of this style of rapid fire, which was reserved for light bowguns. This seems like a pretty big deal, so I'm wondering what new features the light bowgun will get to set it apart. Right after this, however, we've got something brand new altogether. This new feature is called Ignition Mode, and it seems to revolve around attaching this new device to the bowgun. It looks kinda like some sort of nitro injector or like part of a hot rod or something. According to the description, we can spend energy in this mode to fire special ammo. As we can see right here, this gives us machine gun style shots almost identical to the Wyvern Heart ammo from previous games. Supposedly, however, this new mode isn't exclusively for Wyvern Heart style shots, as we will see coming up. Another new feature for this mode, as explained here, is that the energy for it will both regenerate over time and also when landing hits. Previously, the special ammo gauges would only charge with time, but having this one charge with damage is a good way to reward more aggressive play. Also, by the way, since the ammo counter is visible in this footage, we can in fact confirm that the rapid fire shots are only consuming 1 shot per burst, which is also in line with how light bowgun rapid fire has worked. Next up, we have an example of the Heavy Bowgun being used to block an attack. And this text is interesting. So we will be getting the auto guard, which is how the Heavy Bowgun behaved in the past, but we also have a manual guard too. I'm wondering if that is specifically what we are seeing in this clip, where the manual guard lets us tank an attack more effectively. I think this might be the case as we see a few guards in the second trailer, and these look like the old style of auto guard. This guard on the other hand has a unique animation where we crouch down to tank the attack and then follow up with this really smooth backstep that would likely put us into optimal firing range. Speaking of optimal firing range, since the aiming reticule is visible in some of these clips, we can see the same behavior that we had in the past games, where if we are within critical firing distance, the reticule lights up to tell us this. Otherwise, it will be less highlighted to tell us that we are either too close or too far to deal optimal damage. Now supposedly, this next bit has to do with focus mode. While in focus mode, we can of course see the weak spot highlighting, but we perform this new attack where we crouch down and charge up a very powerful shot that seems to stick in the target and explode like sticky ammo. We can also see the ignition mode device activate for this shot, and it does in fact consume a chunk of our gauge, so this is yet another use for the ignition mode energy. And next up, we have another look at the crazy device we saw back in the first trailer. Basically, this just has us attach a big, something to the barrel of our gun that immediately explodes in the monster's face. Thinking about it, I wonder if this is also sort of a counterattack similar to the one the Greatsword had, since it looked like it exploded upon the monster coming into contact with it, and the stagger animation seemed quite similar. Also, this clip is slightly different from the one in the trailer, as this one exploded almost immediately, while in the trailer, the hunter charged it for a bit. Just a few more things left in this preview. Here we have what seems to be another type of new shot that seems to stick in the monster and deal continuous damage. I'm guessing that this might be another ignition mode shot, as the device seems to be engaged while firing it. And for this final clip, I think we are dealing with another monster clash, as it seems like we are holding the Heavy Bowgun in the monster's mouth while holding it back before blasting it away. And that should wrap up the Heavy Bowgun preview. The main thing I am most curious about is all the things that are possible with ignition mode. Aside from the few standard shots at the beginning of the preview, most of the new stuff seemed to use the new device, and it's worth noting that all of this was done on the same bowgun. So hopefully we won't just have the divide between Wyvern Heart and Wyvern Snipe bowguns like before, and instead a whole bunch of shots will be available with ignition mode. Alright, the next preview dropped was for the Insect Glaive, so I guess having any predictable order is out the window at this point. Gear time, I'm quite sure that the armor and weapon are from the Chotacabra. The gauntlets the hunter has in particular seem reminiscent of the monster's spiky arms. Now, I have to bring up one nagging thought in my mind. While this insect glaive looks pretty cool, I can't help but notice the obvious bone blade on it. This is, I think, one of our first examples of a weapon made from monster parts, and I know a thing that people did not love about World's weapon designs was the fact that many of them used the base bone or iron models and just slapped on a few monster parts. But of course, this could just as easily be a unique weapon design, as the large ball on the end of the glaive seems pretty distinct. Also, even if this was a modified bone weapon, I wouldn't mind seeing these types of designs as a sort of intermediate weapon form where the later weapon upgrades switch to a much more unique design. And so, the first move we get a sneak peek of is a classic insect glaive move, the Jumping Advancing Slash, one of the bread and butter moves for maintaining a very long aerial combo. Jumping into the basics, we have a look at the new Insect Glaive UI, with the icon for the extracts carried by the insect and the 3 buff slots. Also in the middle here is, I believe, the insect's stamina bar. I like how cleanly they fit that into the UI instead of putting it below everything. Now of course, it seems like we can send out the bug in the direction of our aiming reticule, which is how it worked before. Even here, there is something new however. If we look under our aiming reticule, a red icon pops up when we are aiming at the monster's head. I believe that this is telling us what color of extract we will receive from the part we are aiming at, and that is some really handy quality of life to save us from guessing what monster parts give what colors. Another thing to note is that although we don't see it in this trailer, it definitely looks like there is space in the UI for our bug to hold 2 extracts. In World, this was a feature added in Iceborne, and it was enabled by feeding your insect slinger ammo. Based on the UI in Wilds already having space for 2 extracts by default, I would guess that this is a behavior that we will have access to at all times. But you know, I think aiming and sending out our bug manually is so old school. The new hotness is having the bug automatically fly out while attacking. In these next clips we can see that we are now in focus mode. Note the aiming reticule is different, as well as the overhead stance that we are holding the weapon in. So instead of aiming our insect, we are aiming our weapon attacks. And when we execute this precision attack on the monster's head, our bug flies out like a bullet and swiftly grabs that red extract. Now that's multitasking. The next attack we perform on the tail has our bug grab the orange for us. Now there is one more interesting change to note here. These combos we are performing at this point seem to be the weak versions. What I mean by this is that they are similar to the Insect Glaive moveset that we have before obtaining a red extract. If you are an Insect Glaive player, you will know that the most important extract to have at all times is the red one, as it essentially unlocks the weapon's true moveset, making all attacks hit more times. But what's odd is that at this point, we do have the red extract, yet we still seem to have the weak moveset. That is, however, until we pick up our final white extract. Once we have this white extract, that completes the full set of the 3, and right after that, the hunter will start performing the Insect Glaive's enhanced moves. I think what this might mean is that in order to unlock the weapon's true potential, we will need to have all 3 extracts, which makes these new tools we are receiving for gathering extracts that much more useful. In this enhanced combo, we can recognize the first, third, and fourth moves as classic Insect Glaive attacks. However, the second move looks kinda new, as it is this sideways spinning slash that seems to be used to change our hunter's direction to better track the monster's movements. Remember, we still have the focus mode reticule up during this time, so it would make sense that we have more ability to aim our attacks. Also notable is the bug's movements during this combo. The first hit sent the bug forward, which of course we can use to grab an extract, but in our follow-up moves, the bug is still out there and starts spinning like crazy, almost as if it's mimicking our movements. This kinda reminds me of the assist type Kinsects from Rise, where some attacks would let your bug orbit around you to deal extra damage. Next up, we have the Insect Glaive signature feature, the Vault. In the footage, we do a vault into a jumping advancing slash into what might be our first time seeing a monster mount. We have received confirmation that mounting monsters will return, and from the closed-door previews, it was reported that it is more seamless, with the hunter grabbing onto the monster right where they landed their jumping attack. That definitely does look like what is happening here. I imagine we will learn exactly how monster mounting will work once the game is publicly playable. Moving on, we have our official explanation for how focus mode works, like we've had for the other weapon types. I do think despite being before this point, focus mode was still involved in the last gameplay snippets with the Kinsect auto attacks. This part in particular, however, does seem to be a unique focus mode move designed to target weak points. For this move, we have this really fierce stab, followed by a quick backflip slash, and then this amazing bit where we fire our Kinsect out like a bullet. I really hope that the Kinsect will actually do substantial damage for these types of moves, because I've always felt that the damage done by Kinsects has never made an impact, so it was never really worth investing in damage for them. Now, do I even need to talk about this? I mean, come on, what more is there to say? All I want to know is, how can I do this as often as possible? Now, it is possible that this is a mount finisher, but we can also see a few frames where the hunter is flying in before landing on the monster and doing this, so it could be some sort of aerial attack that uses our momentum to do this spin to win. Rounding out this preview, we've got two more rapid fire clips. First, one more seemingly new move that feels like the aerial spin attack but performed from the ground. And finally, we have the downwards aerial stab that was introduced back in Iceborne. This one is basically unchanged from that. Overall, I think the honestly more interesting changes for the Insect Glaive are the incorporation of the Kinsect with basic attacks. I think giving the Kinsect more offensive abilities will help it feel more cohesive with the weapon instead of being just the thing that you have to do before you're allowed to play with your spinny stick. Don't get me wrong though, the new spinny winny moves look amazing, but honestly that's just to be expected for the Insect Glaive at this point. Hi, this is Laj from the scriptwriting phase. I am starting to regret my idea to combine multiple videos into one because we've got quite a few words here already, and I'm probably about to double my word count with this last one. Well, I guess let's just get this over with. The next preview on the list is the Gunlance. So supposedly it was stated that there were no plans for new weapon types in Wilds at this time. Turns out that was a dang lie, because what on earth is this? Now, there might be a bit of bias here as I am an avid Gunlance user, like I'm sure people might be seeing the previews for their mains and having the same reaction that I'm having. But even still, I'd like to think that I have enough experience with all the weapon types that I can identify the impact these changes will have on their core playstyles. And so far, none of the previous ones have even come close to the level of changes the Gunlance has. Scriptwriter's notes, don't worry, at this point I have seen the Hunting Horn preview and I will concede that its changes do approach the same level. So there's a fun bit of foreshadowing for the next video. At any rate, there's going to be quite a lot to talk about for this weapon. In the interest of maybe not doubling this video's length, I'll try to be as concise as possible, but I don't want to miss any important details either, so we'll see how I do. Let's get started. Now for our gear check, we have a hunter in the ingot armor set from previous games. The Gunlance on the other hand is definitely of our local starter weapon line, and oh man does it look cool. The leather details on the shield and the body of the lance itself stand out in particular. The first move we see performed is, well, it's new, we'll see it later. Starting with the basic weapon details, we are treated to quite possibly the one part of this weapon that is behaving the way that it used to. We simply have a basic combo with 2 pokes of the lance and 2 shells followed by a quick back hop. The distance on the back hop seemed pretty decent, although I would guess that it was a long back hop done by inputting back while dodging. I can't imagine the dodge distance being quite up at rise levels, so maybe this is about in line with the world dodge distance. Next up, use sidestep to make small positioning adjustments. Pretty informative. Except there's one tiny part they forgot to mention, that being everything. Sure, I guess technically some sidesteps are involved here, but the thing that I am seeing in front of my face is strafing fire. That's right, we are able to fire off some shells while repositioning. Rise aside, I think it would be fair to say that the Gunlance has traditionally been one of the weapons with the lowest level of mobility. Along with the lance, the weapon has the lowest level of walking speed, and your evades have always been limited to the hops, which while good for minor position adjustments, are not so great for closing distances. But at least the lance has more tools for gap closing, such as the guard advance and the charge. From this clip alone, however, I am seeing two brand new tools for mobility. First, of course, we have these shell strafing hops. It's hard to tell, but the distance on these does seem to be pretty decent. This could, however, just be my brain wanting to imagine that these shells are providing an extra boost to the movements, but I kinda actually doubt that. I'm actually recalling a behavior that I swear was present in Monster Hunter Frontier Online, where the Gunlance could fire a shell left or right to quickly strafe in the opposite direction. After the blast dash, this is a feature that I have always wanted to see for the weapon. Now what could arguably be even more impressive in this clip is the follow-up from this shell strafe. Without breaking the combo, our hunter chains the sidesteps into an uncharacteristically swift running sweep that closes the gap that was just made. Previously, the only real gap closer the Gunlance has had, blast dash aside, has been the relatively underwhelming lunging thrust. In comparison, this one looks so much more effective. And not only does the distance on it look great, but the fact that it is a wide sweep means it will likely be way better at catching a monster that has moved to the side. But we're not even halfway done with just this single clip. After this running sweep, we have yet another follow-up, and I gotta say that Slaplance enjoyers are eating good because this is a second wide sweep. But wait, it's not just any wide sweep, this is an actual full burst combined with a sweep. This is once again a move that I have always wanted to see for the Gunlance. You may or may not be familiar with the Gunlance's aerial full burst. It's not a move that you would have many opportunities to perform, but what we are seeing here is basically that move, but on the ground. And by the way, this is another move that I am pretty sure has existed in the Frontier Gunlance's moveset. Oh, hold on, I actually found some footage for it. Now I remember why I always wanted this move. I mean, look at this. So all that aside, I do think the main reason I'm really excited for both the strafe shelling and the burst sweep is the concept of integrating shelling more into the general weapon playstyle. Because as someone who loves the Gunlance for the shelling, it has always made me sad when the shelling damage inevitably falls off, so anyone who wants to play the weapon well just plays Slaplance. So now we have a solution. Force you to fire shells anyways. Like, if you have the option to shell while evading, you better be firing that shell or you could be missing out on damage. And similarly, if you want to do a big wide sweep for that sweet physical damage, you might as well throw some shells in there too. I can't guarantee that shelling will scale well in wilds, but if it's a matter of adding in a bit of extra damage when you can, then you won't really have a reason not to do it. Oh, by the way, you know this really cool combo that we've been looking at for this whole rant that I've been doing? Well, why not top it off with a nice little worm stake? You know, that really cool thing that is super hard to ever do because of the lengthy animation and horrible hitbox reach? Yeah, how about we just casually chuck one out there with almost no windup? If you haven't been able to tell so far, I think this is pretty good actually. So we finally get to move on to another clip, about time. And look, it's something normal, a simple guard. The guard on the Gunlance has never really been that special. Although the shield strength is tied with the regular lance for being the strongest in the game, there's never really been anything unique you could do with the Gunlance's shield. Not that that's a problem, it's still great at guarding, but compared to the likes of the lance with all its cool guard advances and counter moves, it's just never been too interesting. Okay, what the heck was that? Okay, the Gunlance might actually have a guard counter now. Judging by the timing of this move, it felt like activating the guard in time with the monster's attack allowed the hunter to more effectively absorb the hit, which then let them follow up quickly with an overhead smash. Actually, looking back, this reminds me of the behavior we saw with the heavy Bowgun's guard, which was used with similar timing, and upon blocking the attack, we got this similar sound effect. Perhaps many blocking weapons will have a similar feature that allows for well-timed guard counters. Or perhaps this is sneakily a feature of focus mode relating to aiming your blocks. I think it's safe to move on to the next clip for now. So this is not Wyvern Fire. Instead, I am thinking that this is something akin to charged shelling, but like with way more charging. We can see that during this period, the Gunlance pulses repeatedly, which feels like a sort of ascension through charge levels. Unlike Wyvern Fire or classic charged shelling, however, the hunter is able to move during this charge time. Also, this move is basically being performed from a guarding stance, so I would assume that attacks can be blocked while doing this. I'm really curious if there will be any limitations on this move like Wyvern Fire, because if it can be performed without needing a recharge and done with a guard up, I feel like you could go full tank mode with this. Well, maybe the DPS will suck like classic charge shelling. I guess that would balance it fine. And thank goodness we get a clip without something new in it. This is a combo that we could do already. Upswing into downswing into full burst. Next clip please. Now this is Wyvern Fire. If we hadn't seen this, you could have convinced me that the last charge shell move was this game's Wyvern Fire, but now it's obvious. And just one thing. Does this Wyvern Fire seem just a bit long to you? Well, here's a lovely little comparison. Yep, definitely longer, but I have seen some speculation going around that this Wyvern Fire is being charged, and that could be backed up by this additional sound effect that we hear right before releasing the shot. So allowing the Wyvern Fire to be charged could allow for that extra bit of damage when we have a good window. But alternatively, if this is just how Wyvern Fire is by default now, I'm not entirely opposed to that. If it really takes that long just to get it out, then I really hope it does enough damage to be worth it. Because by default, Wyvern Fire never really felt all that impactful. Even when you have it available, you would probably be farther ahead just doing other attacks. So I'm fine with making Wyvern Fire harder to use, but far stronger. And that should just about do it for earth-shattering Gunlance changes. Just kidding, have this now. I guess they heard me when I was complaining that the lance gets its fancy charge, because sure, the Gunlance now gets that but with a drill, because why not? Similar to the insect glaive move we saw before, I think what we're seeing is self-explanatory. Don't really gotta say much else about this one. And you would think there wouldn't be too much more to cover in these final 10 seconds when it starts rapid firing clips at us, but well, this first one is at least just another Wyvern Fire, but right after this we have all of this. Come on, I'm so behind with this video now. Okay, focus, I can do this. So we don't see what leads up to this point, but our hunter is currently in the process of firing a wormstake. And immediately after, we have a quick reload. But not just any quick reload. If we look closely, we can see that this quick reload is able to reload a fresh new wormstake for us. The other thing to notice during this time is that our hunter's shield is held in front of them and it is glowing. This almost definitely indicates that this move will include a guard point, which makes this reload quite similar functionally to Ryze's guard reload, but motion-wise this one is way more slick. And combo-wise, we are able to instantly chain into yet another burst sweep, this one however being a downward swing. Finally, we lunge forward and once again just casually drop one more wormstake on the monster for good measure. This motion in particular also has us holding our shield out in front with the same white glow, which I think means that this wormstake attack will also guard us at the same time. So yeah, that's a lot. I honestly can't even fathom how many new combo paths have been opened up for the weapon. It seems like we now have multiple moves that let us swing and shell at the same time, and don't get me started on the number of different ways to throw out wormstakes when we feel like it. We do have one final thing in this preview though. This last clip is what I assume to be our clash animation. It seems that in this case, we are just at the end of the animation where our hunter is stopping the monster with the shield right before aiming the lance and blasting a point-blank shell. Well, that should just about wrap things up for the Gunlance. If you couldn't tell by this point, I think these changes are pretty huge. And despite how different the weapon seems, I really love what I am seeing so far. It honestly feels like we will be encouraged to mix shelling with melee thanks to these much more fluid combos that allow us to attack, shell, and reload without ever breaking the flow. Now yes, there is something noticeably absent from this preview. No blast dash. This was really one of my favorite additions to the weapon in Ryze, but I do have to admit, since we were expecting an experience closer to World with Wilds, I could understand not including blast dash. In terms of mobility, it feels like we have more than enough tools to make up for it anyways. Of course, there is most definitely plenty that we haven't seen for all of the weapons, so I can probably hold out a little hope. And finally, we can go up and wrap up this video. I'm unfortunately a bit behind on making this video. Originally, I was actually planning on including 5 weapons in this first one as the 5th weapon preview is already out. But knowing how long that one is going to be, I think it's better to wrap up this video for now. Once I get this one out, hopefully I will have a bit of time to start analyzing the next set of weapons as they release and hopefully get more ahead on the writing and voiceover. So that's gonna do it then. I gotta already start analyzing this beast of a hunting horn preview, so for now, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.